Okay, this is going to be kind of a short, straight to the point review of this MiG 170 titanium that's sold by Harbor Freight. So to start out with, this machine's meant for 120 or 240. It's kind of the middle of the line. They got this 170, and then they have a 140, and then they have a 200. This machine was $500. It comes standard. The plug on it, it's rather long. It's actually nice. It's a 240 plug, and it comes with a adapter for 120. That's what we're running it on. So when you run it on different voltages, here in the back, there's a little switch for 120 or 240. If this switch back here is on 240, but you're plugged into 120, that's where we have it set now. Your display shows this. Now I'll switch out to 120 in the back, and our display goes to normal wire feed amps voltage. Okay, so this machine comes in the box. It comes with a whip that is like that long. I don't know, about 10 foot. Your negative cable. Ground clamp. Ground clamp is, I don't know, some people don't care for it, but it does have a crossover from side to side. That's nice. Probably pull some decent amps through it. It might be a little bit cheap, but we'll see how long she lasts. So on the front of it, it's pretty nice. It's got the twisty lock cables. Number one reason, well, not number one of the reasons I really like this is if you're wanting to switch between dual shield or hardwire, you just flip those back and forth. Also, where I store this welder is rather compact, so it's pretty nice to just be able to undo this. Something that's a little bit different on this machine is your control cable or switch cable, whatever you want to call it. On some machines, if you can unplug it, it plugs in and you twist this little thing. This is a quick disconnect, just like an air hose. I really like that. This is non-standard. It's not going to be found like on a Tweako gun on that note, but I do like it because it's so easy to come on and off. And it's also got some an O-ring in there to prevent the ingress of dust and junk. What I really like about that is it comes off so quick for packing this up. This comes out easy enough with just a little wing nut inside. The nice thing about this is that there is a Tweako gun that you can get that fits that. It doesn't fit this, but that's easily adaptable. You just undo it, change the pins over, or you buy one of these off of eBay and make a custom adapter. I've got it set welding right now, but these dials are pretty nice. Full range of change. You can change down to the tenths of a voltage, if you will. Wire feed, this is on 120. Now this only goes up to max depending on whatever voltage and what have you. Whatever voltage you're plugged into will limit this. When you're plugged into 240, you get higher numbers. I'll go over this in a minute, but they call this an inductance change. This is interesting. The best way I can tell you what it does is it changes your weld puddle and characters of welding. I don't know a lot about it, but when you got her turned over this way, it's kind of the best thing I can say. If you're familiar with arc welding, it's kind of like the difference in running 60-10 rod or 70-18, where you've got that fluid puddle with the 70-18, and then you've got kind of a fast freezing puddle, a little bit more controllable with the 60-10. We'll have a peek inside real quick. I'm going to turn her off. The master power switch is in the back. One thing to note, this is nice and light. I think it's around 27 pounds. Or the 140 Lincoln that this replaced was damn near 50 pounds. So having a look inside of here, another kind of fun feature is this guy here. for your gas. This can run a spool gun, and here's the switch for that, going between MIG flux or your spool gun. I've got a larger Hobart spool gun, but it doesn't fit in that, but you could easily make an adapter. Haven't gotten a spool gun on aluminum yet, but at some point I will. That's part of the reason I bought this. As far as this goes, pretty decent die cast housing here. Seems pretty rugged. This is all pretty nice. The machining on all these bits and pieces, well, machining and production craftsmanship, if you will, is actually pretty decent. Usually something like this, you're going to see, and like the end of that's just going to be like it was smushed out of something, but it's actually pretty decent. Just that little part there or whatever, you know. But usually that's where something's skimped on. There's not a heck of a lot of skimping that I can tell on this machine. Really, it's pretty decent. Even such things, you know, that's a pretty nice connector there. Not just some crappy wire strap or even hose clamp. Okay, moving on. Of course, when it comes with a couple of pounds of, you know, actually this is a little bit better flux core than I've gotten from Harbor Freight before. I rather run Lincoln I rather run Lincoln shielded wire, but we're just going to burn this up for the project we're on now. This whole assembly is really pretty nice. The motor actually has some literature on there. I've found usually if they put stuff on their product as far as the individual components are, they're better than the stuff that doesn't have any literature on there. Anyhow, comes with extra roller, running dual shield, or not dual shield, excuse me, flux core. I was having some issues until I forgot to change this over. You've got one that's got the aggressive groove in there, what for running your wire on your inner shield or flux core, and it did improve immensely just swapping that over. Nice tensioning device there, nice little roll pin holding it in. Really, I can't complain. This feature is nice, this little pokey bit. Sometimes these machines, you'll just have the coiled wire booger, I'll use my words. You'll just have the shield sheath that goes through the gun coming out here, relying on this to feed it. It looks kind of like that. But this is really nice and does a really good job of keeping this thing from buggering up. Some of the cheaper machines, you know, your tip will get junky, and then you'll have it won't want to feed, and it just makes a rat's nest of wire here. This one so far hasn't had a problem. Okay, as far as the features on this machine as duty cycle and all that, I'll let you look that up on the internet at Harbor Freight or whatever, but if you want to pause your screen, you can see what it says here. Now, it says the duty cycle, so running 120 90 amps, you can run for 4 minutes out of 10, if you can see. So far what I've found out is I've welded on 120 on a 20 amp breaker, and this thing just kept rocking and rolling. And that was on hardwire CO2, and that's here. Now these are not pretty welds, but there were some pretty welds down in here. What I ended up doing is just looked at my clock and just kept piling weld up. And then same here, this is 2 layers, and kind of just, you know, put it to it on this machine. You see as it got hotter and hotter, our passes just went to kind of mush and whatever. Just wanted to lay a pile of weld down and see if it would trip the breaker or the machine would, you know, go into a duty cycle. And it never did, and we welded for I think 12 minutes straight between all this junk. So yeah. Okay, one other feature to note on this machine, it's got 2T, 4T on here. Those of you that get into TIG welding would see that. So basically, this is normal, pull the trigger and the wire feeds and sparks happen and magic stuff until you let off the trigger. This one, pull the trigger and hold it, start welding, let off, and it will continue welding until you pull that trigger and let off again. Just like you can set most, some TIG welders have a feature like that, which is actually kind of interesting, not necessarily horribly something I would use MIG welding, I think. However, I believe you can run a TIG torch off of this one. The 200 comes with a TIG torch. I don't know whether this is intended to run a TIG torch, but it seems like you can run a TIG torch off it anyhow. On that note, when you're running gas on this, it has a pre-flow and a post-flow to it. So when you pull a trigger, there's about a half a second or so of gas coming out before you start having the wire arc. When you let off the trigger, then the gas continues to flow for like half a minute or half a second or a second, whatever. Okay, moving on. I was talking about that inductance. Okay, so they got this induction, crap, I can't remember how to say it. Yeah, they have that knob, and they call it somewhere that starts with an I that I cannot pronounce. Inductance, and I'm so tongue-tied about this. So this setting that they call induction, or whatever. We're gonna go look at what the differences are that I've found with that. I haven't looked up anything on the interwebs and don't know a lot, but I'll tell you what I do know about that. And so far it's kind of cool. Okay, so all these welds, we're just tacking it in as we're pressing this piece of plate in here because this thing is bent up horribly. And so a lot of these welds, I'm just playing around with settings. Now, I've got these 3 welds here, never mind this one or this one. And these welds were done with the same settings, with the same little cursive maneuver or whatever. Now, this is on the far side of that induction knob over on the 10. And what I've found with that is that there's kind of a more angry, faster freezing puddle, kind of like you'd find on like a 6010 rod. What I've found over on the 1, and it works a little bit better on solid wire, gas shielded solid wire, and is more noticeable than when we're running this on DCN with the flux core wire, but there's still a bit of a noticeable difference. Over here on 1, it's kind of like a softer, wider, more fluid puddle. Over there on 10, we're running, it's more of a kind of like an angry, faster freezing arc, a lot like the difference in 6010 and 7018. Now this is kind of in the middle over here on 5, and I liked that quite a bit. And I actually kind of liked somewhere in between 10 and 5, running around 7. So this is kind of interesting. Where this comes into play is welding uphill. For a fillet or a butt joint, I find myself closer towards the 1, at least with hardwire. With this, I'm leaving it kind of just at the same setting no matter what. But if you start running uphill, it actually helps to run it over towards the 10 on that induction knob. I actually have this. So yeah, so if you're running uphill, you can turn it towards this side of the knob, and it kind of helps from that puddle falling out with a little bit of an uphill push doing, you know, like the Christmas tree or what have you. So that's what I found out about it. But this is what I'm starting to run on just now. It's a fairly flat, not super concave bead. See if I can get you. You know, not the best welds ever, but nothing to shake a stick at too much. Of course, I don't know a lot about that feature just yet, but that's what I can tell you now. Okay, so this machine also comes with your gas hose and regulator. This is definitely a cheaper regulator, but for all honesty, it's not horrible. This and the ground clamp are the least pretty things, but it's really not too bad. It's got a pretty decent, just rubber with woven whatever fabric covering, but it's a pretty decent hose. The fittings, again, are I forget what you call them, kind of strap clamp boogers, but they're pretty decently affixed. Again, it's not just a hose clamp, but pretty happy with that, really, compared to some of the stuff I've gotten on other machines. Okay, moving on. Why I bought this? I had a Clark 140 for like, oh geez, 12, 13, 14 years, and it finally kind of burned up. So I went to just a Lincoln 140, middle of the road, that was 640 bucks, I believe. It welds great, it's a great machine and everything. However, it would hit the duty cycle all the time, and when you're trying to do something that's paying, having to wait for 6-7 minutes for something to cool off so that you can start welding again, because it's a little computer board told you that you need to stop welding for a bit for safety or whatever, because it hits its duty cycle, was rough. So I talked a buddy into getting a welder, sort of. Not this one, but this is the one he ended up getting, and this thing was pretty dang awesome as far as duty cycle goes and what features it has. It was 150 bucks less than that Lincoln, and not to be trashing everyone, I guess. I'm not really a Harbor Freight supporter, or Lincoln, or Miller, or Hobart, whatever. I've always welded with mostly Lincoln. Some Miller machines here, some Hobart machines there, whatever gets the job done. But this thing is kind of kick-ass so far. We'll see how long it lasts. I've got a 2-year warranty on it. But like I say, this can be replaced with a Tweco gun. The consumables are not crossover. Of course, the tips they are, but as far as the shielding cups and all that jazz, not so much. Let's look at that real quick, actually. So as far as that goes, it does come with a gas shield cup and then with this flux core shielding cup. Let me pull that off real quick. Okay, so it's kind of different. They've got like a spring in there, and it doesn't twist on, it just presses on and off. It's kind of a bugger to get on and off. We'll see how long all this lasts. That is got a bit of brass inside of there. It's not just some heat, whatever, resistant plastic. So, I don't know. Maybe I would replace this with a Tweco gun if it's running it every day, so I don't have to rely on Harbor Freight consumables, but we'll just see how she goes. This thing's pretty okay for whatever, DIY, home, hobbyist, even, heck, I'd run it in the shop. The parts are cheap enough. Okay, I can run it on 240 with a higher duty cycle. I can do more with it on 240 than I could with my Lincoln 140. I can run a spool gun on it for welding aluminum, and I imagine that little knob there, I'm really excited to run a spool gun with aluminum on this, because I imagine that little knob there is really going to come into play when it comes to the spool gun with aluminum. Another reason I bought it, your whip and your ground clamp are easily, they come off pretty easily, and they can actually fit in there if you don't have wire spool on there. But for packing this up, I'm relatively mobile. Everything is in that tool bed that goes on the back of my truck, and the welder goes in that box there. I can run this, third reason, on 240 in a shop setting, and it has a higher duty cycle, and I can burn higher amps. Okay, one of the next reasons was that cost-wise, this was 150 bucks less than a 120 machine from really either Miller, Lincoln, Hobart. Hobart has something pretty close, but still it was about 100 bucks more or so. Y'all look around, get what you want. I might be a little off on those prices, but really for what you get, you're looking at a machine from one of the big three or big two that's up in the $1,200–1,300 range with the dual voltage and all that jazz. The thing welds good. I'm pretty decently impressed with it. Even with the monkey being me behind the torch. Of course, these are just trying out the machine welds, whatever. Having a look at the business end of it, of course, all this stuff is kind of me just playing around, getting a feel for the machine, figuring that out. But when you get in it, it can put down some pretty decent welds. So if you're an actual decent welder, you might be able to do something decent just looking at these. So I'll see if we can get some shots welding with this thing. Now, wrapping it up with this little machine, I will say I tried to run it off my little 2500 watt quiet generator over there. It wasn't having it. Doesn't surprise me. It hasn't run anything else anyways. But a guy can always hope. Where was I? Oh yeah, in closing, this thing is price point pretty good. What it can do is pretty good. I would not be afraid to buy this machine. You can get a Tweako torch for it that does plug in there. You gotta do a little bit of adjusting on the wires, whatever. So price wise, I wouldn't be afraid of it. You can get the extended warranty. I think it's like 80 bucks for 2 years. The only thing that I can't say about it is long-term reliability. And of course, as far as fit and function go, the thing's great. Again, the one thing I cannot say a lot for yet, but I'll comment or whatever in the future once we get a bunch of wire through this thing and get some hours on it, if there's any issues. But so far, pretty impressed, and really am pretty happy with this machine. So more cowbell. For those of you that are screaming stringers, not weaves, that's a no weave stringer. And then where's the other one? I've just been dicking around with this thing. But next, originally I said that was 10 and that was 1, but that's 1, that's 10, my bad. Next one is some uphills, and we're just doing the Christmas tree. Like that, and with that, our settings are 030 flux core wire. Now with the induction knob down here towards 2, or yeah, kind of 1 or 2. This is our weld. Uphill Christmas tree. It's at a slight vertical, but more or less uphill. And on the other side of the knob, it looks like this. Again, going up, I feel like there's more of a fluid puddle towards 10 on the induction. And you can see that ripple patterns are kind of less so. We're just seeing the weave pattern, really. And that would be with the knob over there. Now going back to the uphill weld with the knob over here, we see both the weave pattern, but you see in between the weaves pattern, you see a lot more of the waviness, the little lines in between the big lines there, kind of like you would again on a 6010 or a compared to 70-18 rod. What I'm talking about is that you've got these waves like this on the weld. As I go from over here and I hold, I go over here and hold, I go over here and hold, over here and hold. As I go up, Whereas running on towards 10 of the knob, it looks very smooth like this, but when I run on the one side of that knob, we see a lot more little lines, kind of what I'm calling the fast freeze lines. And these, as I'm going up, this puddle is kind of more controllable. It freezes quicker and kind of feels like a smaller puddle. And so long as I stay in that puddle, and that puddle's parameters are a little bit smaller, it seems to have good weld characteristics. It's easier to get out of that weld puddle on the 1 setting of that knob compared to the 10 setting. And again, running it kind of in the middle around 5 seems to be good. I was running it at 7 for most of these welds.